Peering down the hallway toward the bedroom, I made my way to the entrance with heavy steps, devoid of any anticipation for the good or the bad. Recently, life had been uneventful. Reaching the door, I swung it open, only to be met with a shock. There she was, albeit the shadow of the woman I once knew intimately. My jaw must have dropped in astonishment as she breezed by me into the apartment. This very apartment she had vacated roughly 3 months prior, taking her presence out of my life simultaneously. As she examined the modest alterations to the interior of my house, her face betrayed a mix of irritation and scrutiny. My gaze shifted between her, the plates arranged on the table, the hallway, and then back to her. Clearly, this won't do. It seems I must return and intervene directly. And do close the door, if you would. My mind could only muster a single word in response. What? Reflecting on it, shutting the door did appear sensible, especially considering the prying eyes of the neighbors. With an unfocused mind, I observed her scanning the area, taking in the changes to what used to be her domain. My God, did you pick out these cushions? Her question caught me off guard. Sure, my responses weren't the most articulate, but what did she expect under these odd and unexpected circumstances? Have you bothered to clean it all since I left? My gaze swept the room. It wasn't that the place was messy. It was lived in. The obsessive cleaner no longer resided here, freeing me from the necessity of maintaining a sterile, unwelcoming environment. My bags are still in the car. We can get them later. My mind was struggling to function, yet it was evident she was behaving with her usual assurance, which felt out of place in these circumstances. Your hair, I managed to utter. At least I had broken the silence. Yes, I'm aware. It'll grow back before we know it. Her hair had always captivated me immensely. Seeing her now, sporting a chic yet extremely short cut, left me somewhat taken aback. Even though she was no longer mine, the sight of her missing what I considered one of her most appealing traits pained me. It simply didn't sit well with me. It was a real pity. It's going to be at least 5 years. Yet I found my way back to speaking in complete sentences. There's no rush, love. Huh? And what name did she just use for me? Costly? Of course, I'm aware. No need to bring it up. I've been behaving oddly recently, but I've returned to my senses now. All will be okay. She offered me a gentle smile, seemingly trying to soothe the kid. Really? Was that her way of saying sorry? Sure, darling. To my dismay, she approached me, appearing as though she intended to plant a kiss on me. Who was this person, and had she lost her senses completely? Interpreting my facial reaction accurately, she paused and gave me a somewhat astonished glance. I'm aware. You've always had a thing for my hair, yet I sensed a change was necessary in my life. I saw that. Saw what? Oh, I was merely referring to my hair. Besides that, I'm longing for things to revert to their original state. And yes, that includes you, in case it wasn't obvious. She dared to throw me a wink. Your new hairstyle wasn't influenced by Mark. She grimaced a bit. Mark is history. It seemed her latest romance had fizzled out quickly. And? What do you mean? Did Mark have any influence on your new hairstyle? Why do we have to bring him up? After the Turner contract debacle, he was terminated and blacklisted. His career is over, he's history. Getting involved with him was a mistake, and I've moved on. I understood. His professional blunders were well known. Just like you moved on from me. Yes, but I've returned for good now. This time it's going to be amazing, I can feel it, darling. My eyes shifted back to her. Mark didn't influence your choice of haircut. She appeared slightly offended by my continuous questioning, yet she seemed to understand that she couldn't dodge the question. Despite her harsh demeanor, she wasn't one to fabricate the truth. He might have been supportive of it. So it was his suggestion. Possibly, I can't recall. Why does it matter at this point? He left his mark on you. For me, perhaps, or perhaps not. But he certainly left his mark on you. Honey, it's irrelevant. Her tone was unexpectedly gentle. With her short hair and a voice that sounded almost regretful, perhaps even a bit uncertain, here stood a version of my former partner that felt entirely new. She appeared to muster her bravery and unexpectedly started to adjust her dress strap. What's happening? She ceased her attire adjustment, evidently struck by an inspiration, and retrieved her phone from her handbag. She tinkered with it briefly, and then, as if commanded by her, my speakers sprang to life, playing a playlist of hers. Naturally, after residing here for numerous years, she retained complete access to everything, and I had foolishly neglected to update any passwords. I must have been in a trance. I silently watched her peculiar actions. As music filled the air, she began to move in a way that resembled dancing. Though, to be honest, calling it dancing might be a stretch. Dancing was never her thing. She usually steered clear of it. That she was even making an attempt here spoke volumes about her resolve. To my complete surprise, it dawned on me that her odd gyrations were, in fact, her trying to execute a sort of striptease. Indeed, this lady has consistently maintained a somewhat aloof demeanor, always shying away from openly expressing her sexual nature. She detested any form of sexual exhibition, labeling it as sexist. Coupled with this was her total lack of rhythm or grace when it came to dancing to any tune. That she was now prepared to disrobe in my presence spoke volumes about the depth of despair she must be experiencing. A despair she chose not to verbalize, and for reasons unknown, didn't lead her to offer any apologies. The performance of the striptease was somewhat entertaining. I've always been drawn to her intelligence, sense of humor, and overall character. Her physique never needed to be the focal point for me, and indeed, it wasn't designed for a striptease. She had a more solid and athletic build, lacking any sense of grace. Her movements were awkward and uncoordinated, making the whole thing rather uncomfortable. I struggled to keep from laughing, not wanting to insult her. Given what she had done to me, I could have justified hurting her feelings, but that's not who I am. It was a challenging moment for us both, and I did my best to at least appear engaged with her performance. Her actions didn't stir any physiological response in the lower regions of my body. My curiosity was ignited when she playfully revealed a glimpse of her breast, giving me a cheeky grin. I noticed a glint of something and moved closer for a clearer view. Wow, she had a nipple piercing. I wondered how anyone convinced her to go through with it. She's always been fiercely independent, a woman who wouldn't tolerate any foolishness. She'd threatened to castrate me for even hinting at something she perceived as demeaning. Fortunately, my manhood was never at risk, as piercings weren't my thing. They tend to make things look tacky and, in my opinion, detract from a woman's natural beauty. Just like in this instance. "You like it?" she inquired, her smile tinged with that hint of shyness. "Is this about his proposal again?" I ventured a guess. "Why does it matter so much to you?" She responded, attempting a pout that didn't quite suit her, revealing her unfamiliarity with the expression. Her indirect response was a clear indication that my assumption was correct. "I was just curious," she said, her attempt at a seductive smile not quite hitting the mark. She proceeded in her awkward and somewhat pitiful attempt to undress. When her strikingly provocative underwear became visible, my attention was drawn to something peculiar. The mark appeared to be a blemish on her skin. I approached her, observing the area with an odd sense of disinterest. It seemed to be a letter emerging from beneath her undergarments. Indeed, it was an M, peculiar. Suddenly, it hit me. This was the final portion of the mark tattoo. He had convinced her to ink his name near her intimate area. Astounding. This man was beyond my understanding in his ability to persuade her. Could it be he's the one who broke things off with you? All right, I get it. The atmosphere, which might have once held a hint of passion, was now thoroughly dispelled by my words. Not that I was in the mood for romance, and I had a hunch she wasn't either. Her response caught me off guard. Excuse me. It felt good not to be the only one thrown off balance. Just think about it for a second. He wooed you, luring you away from me. He persuaded you to leave me high and dry, to mock me in front of him. He had you chop off your hair knowing full well I loved it long. He branded you with a piercing and even went as far as to tattoo his name on you, right above your private area. And after all that, he casts you aside and sends you back to my doorstep. Maybe this was never really about you. Perhaps he was always just trying to get one over on me. If I accept you now, every little thing will serve as a reminder of his actions, possibly for the rest of my life. Mark and I have been rivals since we were kids. For him, the ultimate victory would be knowing that he could take and permanently claim my woman. Charming, isn't it? To my astonishment, her eyes were brimming with tears. It was a rare sight to see her so overwhelmed with emotion. I can't recall ever witnessing her cry before. Terms of affection like darling were something new from her lips as well. Why didn't you make any effort to get rid of that cursed tattoo before returning? She then appeared slightly regretful, a reaction that was not typical for her. I did consider it. The issue is with the ink. He chose it, and it's notoriously hard to erase. Plus, I'm concerned about potential scarring. It's such a delicate spot. Scarring could really ruin the sensation during intimate moments. Her concern seemed to center on her own sexual satisfaction. Did she not consider how the presence of this tattoo might impact my feelings of desire? Are you expecting? She was utterly taken aback, disbelief coursing through her. Tears began streaming down her face shortly after. How did you find out? Honestly, I hadn't realized it. My mind was racing with thoughts of his potential actions against us. Having his child would be his way of ensuring my ultimate defeat. So, am I right in assuming he abandoned you as soon as he learned you were carrying his child? She gave a simple nod, her sobs persisting. God, I regret not passing up that promotion and letting him have it. He wouldn't have felt the need to use you to get back at me. Maybe you wouldn't have strayed. Perhaps you wouldn't have ended up leaving me for him. Then again, if he could snatch you away so effortlessly, our love wasn't that deep to begin with, was it? That was the painful reality. Our love wasn't the fiery, all-consuming type you find in novels. Yet, we deeply cared for each other and cherished our life together. We were essentially best friends with extra perks. Mark was undeniably attractive. However, I'm convinced that if our love had been genuine, he wouldn't have been able to charm her away. Struggling through tears, she barely got the words out. I wish we could go back. Can we please? You could take that piercing out pretty easily, I bet. Her head bobbed in vigorous agreement. Your hair should grow out again, she continued to nod. And that tattoo might be a laser removal job. Her smile started to break through as she kept nodding. The child, though, that's on you. But I'll handle it. Her spirits visibly lifted, reaching a state of near bliss. I'll stay out of that part. So any physical reminders, we can get rid of them. They'll be gone for good. It's the memories that will be hard for me. What? You abandoned me without a second thought for him. You permitted him to share with you what you consistently denied me. I've always dreamed of starting a family, yet you claimed you weren't prepared. With him, you dove in without a second thought. Had I ever proposed altering your appearance to mirror that of an adult film star, I'm certain I would have swiftly found myself speaking in a much higher pitch. Yet, for him, you had no reservations, and I've refrained from inquiring about the specifics of what you've done for him behind closed doors. Correct. In hindsight, he probably did us a service. What? He harshly revealed the fragility of our bond. He made it clear that your affection for him far outweighs your feelings for me. He exposed that we merely continued out of habit, too scared, or settled to alter our course. And truthfully, if our past connection was that frail, what hope does the future one hold? Perhaps, she murmured, her expression tinged with sorrow, yet she seemed accepting of her circumstances. As she began to clothe herself once more, I couldn't help but feel relieved. The tension in the air seemed to lessen, for discussing grave matters with someone in a state of undress just doesn't sit right. I'm sorry, I found myself saying. These were the words I had longed to hear from her since our parting, yet they never came. It was ironic and somewhat revealing that I ended up uttering them, despite being the one wronged. It dawned on me then that perhaps she was too fragile to offer an apology, just as she had been too fragile to withstand his influence, and too fragile to fight for what we had. In the end, it didn't change the fact that we were better off apart. Thank you. Those words came from me again, echoing her sentiments, and they were deeply sincere. This visit marked the end of the heavy burden I had borne from our past relationship. No, dear, the thanks are mine to give, for your willingness to hear me out, for the beautiful moments we shared. I am truly sorry. It was a poignant moment when she uttered the apology I had longed to hear for ages. Following her words, she gave me a soft kiss on the cheek, a gesture that, to my surprise, left me unfazed, and then she walked towards the door, exiting my apartment and my life for good. It was nice. Honey, what's that noise? The drowsy beauty with flowing locks inquired as she emerged from the bedroom. Nothing, just an old acquaintance, my dear, I responded, right after the door had shut. I preferred my former partner not to witness this scene before exiting my life for good. My principle has always been to avoid adding insult to injury. Do you think it's possible to go see my folks this weekend? I'd really love for you to meet them. Meet your parents? Absolutely, yes. I'm actually looking forward to it. The prospect genuinely filled me with joy. I set my coffee mug down on the creased and stained contract of Turner, and followed the captivating sound of her hair swishing as we went back to the bedroom, ready to begin our day on the right note.